Kia ora everyone, welcome back to our next edition of Econ Talks. Gareth, we've had a new Reserve Bank governor announced by the Finance Minister, Dr. Anna Breman, coming from the Swedish Central Bank, currently the first deputy governor of the Swedish Central Bank, coming to New Zealand from the 1st of December, so waiting a little while before she eventually takes up the top job. But coming, I guess, at a time when we've had a lot of uncertainty in the central bank, a lot of, I guess, questions being asked about around the likes of trust and transparency. She comes what seems to be very highly qualified, a PhD in economics from the Stockholm School of Economics. She's been working in commercial banks. She's been working in central banks. She's been working in different international institutions over time as well. So seems to have a pretty good variety of experiences there and an ability to, I guess, bring some of that different thinking from outside of New Zealand here to our central bank going forward. At the same time, we've heard that the current governor, Christian Hawkesby, who was deputy governor before taking in that interim governor position after the departure of Adrian Orr, he's sticking around until the 30th of November to ensure that smooth transition and to ensure continuity on the Monetary Policy Committee, but then he will depart the bank when the new governor comes in. Look, I was watching the press conference, hearing from the finance minister and the incoming governor. The first response that the incoming governor gave around what her focus was going to be at the Reserve Bank was a lightning focus on maintaining low and stable inflation. Really, I think that sets the scene quite well for just how important of a job the governor has, but also how focused she seems to be on that very critical issue.
Yeah, quite a contrast, I think, to what we've seen over the last 7 years or so with Adrian Orr, where while inflation was obviously still one of the things the Reserve Bank was focusing on, there were a lot of other things around the periphery as well in terms of the Māori economy, in terms of climate change, in terms of prudential regulation and capital requirements for the banks, which will still be a focus going forward as well. But yes, the fact that she answered the question and was very much tightly focused on that inflation target and talked about how, in terms of even for sort of broader economic outcomes, making sure that inflation is low and stable is the best contribution the Reserve Bank can make towards better employment and better economic growth and that sort of thing. I think that was a very telling response in terms of what we can expect going forward. It's kind of very much back to the future, I think, in terms of the way the Reserve Bank operates, rather than some of the sort of broader focus and mandate than we've seen over previous years. I was also interested by some of the responses she gave around what else she might bring to the position. I think one of the things that has really frustrated us as professional economists, and I think will have frustrated others as well over the last few years, certainly through Adrian Orr's governorship, but even previous governors as well, is that the communication coming out of the central bank has diminished over time. And indeed, there's been a certain prickliness across various governors about criticism as well. Whereas the incoming governor, Dr. Breman, she talked about the need for more transparency, the need for getting out there and, consulting with and talking to people and being visible. And to the point where one of the reporters, I think, asked her, are you going to be having street corner meetings to get out amongst the public? And so I think, if she does deliver on that in terms of more speeches and more meetings and more communication, that will also be quite refreshing after a period where we have struggled to get information out of the bank in terms of what they are thinking. And that, of course, has been compounded with the fact that we've got a monetary policy committee, yet we actually see nothing, virtually nothing coming out from any of the other members on that in terms of what they are thinking around monetary policy and the decision-making process as well. I'd note that coming out of the Swedish Central Bank, the bank there does publish more detailed minutes and does also explicitly put information out around, what the thinking is of those individuals on the committee there. And so whether she's thinking about bringing that sort of implementation forward into New Zealand as a measure of greater transparency, we'll wait and see. But she does have that background. I also had a bit of a look, given her responses around, inflation and the importance of that. Where does she sort of fit on the scale of doves to hawks? And I'd have to say the evidence wasn't particularly clear either way, which is probably reassuring, right? We've got one of the Swedish banks, SEB, they, over the last 18 months or so, have rated each of the participants in the central bank committee over there they've ordered them from most dovish to most hawkish at each of the meetings, having gone through the minutes and looked at the comments that have been made. And sometimes Dr. Breman has been right down at number 1 in terms of the most dovish. Sometimes she's been up at number 5 in terms of the most hawkish. You average it out over that sort of 18-month to 2-year period, and she has ended up sitting somewhere in the middle. So while the responses might have been quite sort of inflation focused in terms of what we've been used to here in New Zealand over the last 7 years, it doesn't mean that she's going to necessarily, I think, be hammering inflation at the sort of to the detriment or at the expense of other stuff as well. So interesting to sort of see where she's coming from.
Which is interesting, right? Because also with taking up the appointment from the 1st of December means there's no Monetary Policy Committee meetings or decisions to be held during her tenure until February. The last monetary policy decision for the year happens in late November. And based on both market forecasts and our own expectations, you're probably going to have further cuts in both the October and November meetings. Seems likely potentially at the moment to have a 50 basis point cut in October, followed up with a 25 basis point cut in November, and then that could well be it. So in a sense, the new governor might well enter the monetary policy fray at a time when the first decision is, have we done enough? Do we pause at this juncture? How do we sort of communicate that out to people? So you're right. I mean, there's quite a lot there. It is a bit of a, I guess, break in tradition in a good way in my mind. She's the first female to take up the appointment of governor of the Reserve Bank's 91-year history. But I think importantly, and everyone was at pains to highlight this yesterday during the press conference, that it was very focused around that Dr. Breman is highly qualified for this role. You know, she's got a PhD in economics. She knows her stuff. She's been part of that, not only central bank culture for a while, but importantly also with a focus on the monetary policy angle rather than any of the other parts of central banking duties, financial stability, macro-prudential policy. She has got a pretty strong focus there. You talk around the likes of transparency, I think, is important. That's the thing that we really do want to hear a lot more about and see in action. I mean, look, as a professional economist, it'd be nice to have the opportunity at some point in my career to meet and converse with the governor. Don't think we're going to get one-on-one meetings. Don't think we necessarily should. But it'd be nice to know that we could actually have some sort of dialogue at some point, because to be blunt, haven't had that in my professional career so far. You might have been around long enough, Gareth, potentially, that it has every now and then. But yeah, see, it just doesn't really happen. And I think that the important thing is that the finance minister reiterated that the policy targets agreement doesn't change. The inflation target at 2% remains. The band of 1 to 3% remains. But with a new governor coming in with a different experience of how operationally monetary policy comes through, again, I do think there's a conversation to be held at some point at the right time in the next sort of 12 months after the governor's appointment over could they, again, change some of the charter and the remit a little bit just to make the operations of the Monetary Policy Committee be able to be surfaced a bit more. Because to be blunt, it's actually been quite, I think, reassuring in recent times with Christian Hawkesby as governor, the sort of lengths that he's gone to ensure that there is good, strong communication about the balance of risks. Hey, the Reserve Bank doesn't know absolutely everything, doesn't have a firm and absolutely fixed view on what's happening, but here's what they're thinking and here's how it sort of balances out in the middle, rather than to be, again, blunt before when we sort of got gaslit that the Reserve Bank definitely wasn't U-turning, even though they clearly had shifted their view from a very firm we need to raise interest rates to a very firm we've got to cut them. That sort of stuff wrong-foots the market. And so I think, again, that focus on transparency and clear communication is important. I guess looking forward, again, the new incoming governor won't have any meetings immediately to attend to when it comes to monetary policy settings. What is that expectation, I guess, Gareth, going forward in terms of, some people are saying, well, this is going to have a big influence. I don't really see that to be the case, but I guess what do you expect over the first couple of meetings from the new governor?
Yeah, I mean, I'd note that you say she's, waiting a while before she gets into her post at the 1st of December. Well, that's when her 6-year term actually comes up at the Riksbank. So she's finishing her term, which is not a bad thing, I'd have to say, rather than jumping out even a couple of months early. Look, you go through to early 2026. Look, she's got 2 to 3 months to get her feet under the desk, get her head around how the New Zealand economy works and some of the sort of eccentricities and esoteric parts of it, which will be useful. I'm sure there'll be plenty of advice, obviously, from and information coming from within the Reserve Bank anyway. But yeah, you get to a point there, let's say the OCR is down at 225 because we've had some more cuts in the meantime, then it's probably a case of, well, it's not so much a case of cutting further, I wouldn't have thought. It's a case of, well, when do we start to think that we need to start raising rates again? And that won't be an immediate thing. The bank is not going to be cutting in November and raising in February unless something goes hellishly wrong in the meantime. So, yeah, she does have a bit of time to just sort of get her head around some of those issues, get a better understanding of how the New Zealand economy works, and then start to implement the decisions once conditions have turned, and hopefully that economic recovery is actually becoming a bit more embedded and having a bit more momentum than what we've seen, of course, through 2025.
Indeed, but look, the starting point is very much that we have a new governor. Two, she seems eminently qualified for the position, and three, certainly the first response and probably the most important response that any incoming central bank governor can give was very much around that laser focus on inflation, which I think stands us in a good position going forward. I guess interesting to see as well that there were a few people domestically that put their hands up. I think the finance minister noted that there were something like 3 domestic applications. So good to see that there's still a little bit of liveliness in the New Zealand economics community, but able to bring a bit of a breath of fresh air into the central bank here in New Zealand. And we're looking forward to hearing a lot more from Dr. Breman as we go forward, and that sort of understanding of where the central bank goes next. But for now, no change to what we were thinking about monetary policy. The continued MPC numbers are there for the next couple of meetings, and again, then things will change a bit more from the end of 2025 and into 2026. We'll assess how all of that goes, including how the central bank moves under new leadership, on one of our future editions of Econ Talk.